Welcome in to another PFF college football show, previewing and predicting the biggest games of Week 8. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton and Wasserman going over some massive games in Week 8. And Dalton, it's Week 8, and we've got 8 games once again that we're previewing because once again, there's too many games to talk about that we could not exclude any of these big ones.
Yeah, another big week. And, did it feel like picking, I don't know about you, but for me picking these games, this might have been the hardest week out of all of them. It just feels like these games are more even than any of the rounds of games that we've done before. I had a hard time picking a lot of these winners. We're getting to the point where it feels like we know a lot about teams, but then you start kind of guessing still because there's other factors and injuries and all sorts of things. And then as we get deeper in this playoff race and we're past the halfway point, they just get more and more important. You see the urgency rising. So I don't know about you, but I had a hard time picking a lot of winners in these games.
I really struggled predicting these games, honestly. And we're going to see how we differ on some of these games right now. Let's see what the standings are right now, Dawn, for our records so far this year. You, after a pretty solid week, is now over me with a 29-15 record. I went 2-6 last week, Dawn. I went from a really solid. I had a 1-game lead on you, and now I'm 1 game back from you. So it wasn't even a great week from your standards either, but we both got destroyed in week 7 in what was a chaotic weekend. And now I'm 28-16. You're 29-15. You right now have a 1-game lead on me heading into week 8.
You said I couldn't do it. I remember you at least twice saying I couldn't do it. It's only halfway through the season, though. We got a long way to go. Then we have conference title games and playoffs and all that. It's going to be a lot of fun. These games are only going to get harder to pick.
Absolutely. So let's go to our first game that we will actually be in attendance for, Dawn. That is number 6 Miami at Louisville. It's a noon Eastern time game on ABC. Storylines to know. How does Miami look after a much-needed bye week? I don't know if anyone in the country needed a bye week more than Miami this past weekend because they've really been playing with fire in the last 2 games. They needed a 10-point comeback with 9 minutes left and a completed Hail Mary to be called back to escape with a 38-34 victory over Virginia Tech. And the following week, they mounted a 25-point comeback in the second half to squeak by with a 1-point win over Cal. Now, Hurricanes can all settle down a little bit, slow your heart rate down a little bit during the bye week. But now you go against Louisville, who right now, according to PFF's power rankings, is the best team Miami's played all year. Right now, Louisville's 33rd in PFF's power rankings, the highest ranked team that Miami's played. Also, is at Louisville as well. They got to be careful in this one. They can't really afford to keep playing with fire like they've been.
Absolutely. Look, you get off to slow starts and you get, into big deficits. Eventually, they're just going to catch you. You're not going to be able to have Cam Ward just carry you and come back all the time, right? And I think coming off 2 huge comebacks, you always figure when you're trying to make some sort of championship run that there's going to be 2 or 3 games where your quarterback just gets you through it because he can will you through it, and Cam Ward's one of those guys. But they've used a couple of those games early. And Miami, look, they've been really good. They deserve, obviously, to be deep into the top 10. They're a playoff contender, ACC contender. But they do have to start these games out better and not fall behind early and just put it all on him.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, you have the Miami offense in this one. So what should we know when superstar quarterback Cam Ward has the ball in the stand?
So I do think Miami, from what I've seen, is at a big advantage here. Louisville, we've talked about Louisville on the positive side before. They're really good in run defense. They have these are 2 elite defensive lines going at it. You're going to get into Miami's in a second. Louisville's is really good. They stop the run really well. I believe they're 6th in the country in run defense grade. It has not been the same story in coverage. They have really struggled to defend passes down the field. They've had some injuries at corner. Quincy Riley came back last week for the first time in a few weeks, but it's been tough. They don't have a single cornerback with at least a 70 coverage grade, and they're 92nd in the country in team coverage grade right now. That's good for 12th out of 17 teams in the ACC. You're just seeing Louisville right now. It is a struggle to defend downfield passes. They play a lot of zone coverage, and this is not a team that you want to give up vertical passes to. Right now, Louisville against 10-plus yard throws has the 5th worst coverage grade in the Power 5. It's just teams are getting downfield. They're sucking the linebackers in. They're getting in those zone windows. They're making big plays. You saw it against SMU. Kevin Jennings had a couple of big ones. Haynes King threw the ball well downfield in spite of Louisville stopping the run well in that game. And look, when you're playing against Miami and you're playing Cam Ward, you're playing against one of the best vertical passers in the country, and it's a real problem, okay? Cam Ward has a 94.7 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws. That's the 3rd best in the country. We know he can make big-time throws. He's accurate with it, the 10th best adjusted completion percentage. Cam Ward is an in-rhythm vertical passer. It's one of the special things that he can do is get the ball downfield in a very timely manner, right? We know he gets into trouble sometimes improvising. We saw the pick 6 against Cal. We saw a couple others against Virginia Tech. But when he's in rhythm and he's allowed to get the ball down the field, really, really dangerous, and that's been the big weak spot for Louisville. So if they don't get a pass rusher, they don't start making better decisions and being more fundamentally sound in coverage. I think the two guys that could have big games here, obviously Xavier Restrepo is one of the best receivers in the country, and all that zone coverage. He's got a high football IQ. He knows how to battle through those coverages. But Isaiah Horton's another guy. He's really been their second best vertical receiver in this offense. I think those two guys could have big days for this team against a Louisville secondary that has just struggled to cover vertical passes, and they've missed a lot of tackles too, okay? It's just 30 missed tackles in coverage this year. I believe there's only 4 or 5 teams. It's actually the fourth most in the Power 5 in coverage. 30 missed tackles in coverage. So they're not tackling great, and they're not defending the downfield pass. If Cam Ward's allowed to hit those vertical windows early in this game, Louisville's got a real problem.
Yeah, and also they have a problem on the other side of the ball, too, because Cam Ward has been special, but you can make the argument that Miami's front seven has been the best part of their team. Right now, Miami is the second best front seven grade, which means defensive line and linebackers. They have the second best grade in the country in the front seven at a 91.7 mark. The only team that has a better one is Ole Miss right now. And Ole Miss, we all know how good their D-line and linebackers are. Miami's linebackers are fourth in the nation in grade as a unit. Defensive line is third in the nation in grade as a unit. And Miami leads the nation in pressure rate this year at 45.1%. Louisville's offensive line is kind of below average right now. They're 41st in the Power 4 in offensive line grade. They've given up a pressure on 37.2% of their dropbacks, which is 118th in the country. But Tyler Shuck, to his credit, has been solid. 65.2 passing grade under pressure is actually 26th in the country. So he's been solid under pressure, which is good for them because the offensive line is putting him under pressure a lot, honestly. The one advantage I think Louisville can exploit maybe in this game is their run game with their stable of running backs. They don't have a true number one running back, but they have a really good stable of running backs. Right now, Louisville is 11th in the country, averaging 6.3 yards per carry. Miami has given up 4.7 yards per carry, which is 60th in the country. So it's an average Miami run defense for the most part against a really, really good Louisville run game. That, I think, is the way for them to maybe take some of the pressure off Tyler Shuck a little bit. But I think in terms of pass rushing wise, Miami's got a big advantage over Louisville on the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. And Shuck's been good under pressure. I will say I think the other advantage Louisville does have is that Miami's secondary, as good as front seven's been, Miami's secondary has been vulnerable. And you got guys even at corner like Darryl Porter Jr., he's got the lowest coverage grade of any of their starters right now. They haven't held up the best in coverage so far. They're still figuring it out. Obviously, 2 new starting safeties. They lost both their starting safeties to the NFL draft. I think what you have is Louisville, as always, if they can get into their run game, like you mentioned, and then they can get into those play-action concepts outside the numbers and get the ball to Ja'Cory Brooks down the field, then you're talking about, okay, if they can get in their wheelhouse, they can stay in this game, because they had pretty good success with it against Notre Dame when they weren't turning the ball over, too, and Notre Dame's got a much better secondary than Miami. So there's a window here for Louisville to score points, but they have to execute really well.
So, Dalton, in the game that we will be attending on Saturday, who will win? Will Miami suffer their first loss of the year, or will Miami continue their undefeated season?
I think if I'm Miami in this game, as opposed, I know they're trying to establish the run early, and they don't have the most diverse run game, and they're trying to really, they usually get off to slow starts in part because they're trying to establish everything on offense. I get it. If I was them in this game, though, I might take their fourth quarter offense that we've seen the last two games and have Cam Ward get in a hurry up and stress out this secondary early. Let's pass to set up the run. Let's take deep shots early. Let's get Restrepo and Horton and Sam Brown and all those guys going. I think Miami has an opportunity here to score a lot of points. This Louisville secondary, it's been a problem. It hasn't been the same as it was last year. Last year was really good. Tamp down the big plays, right? This year, they're giving up more vertical shots, and I think that plays into Miami's hands. I've got Miami 38, Louisville 27. I think we could get a high-scoring game. I think Shuck will have opportunities to succeed, but not as many as Ward.
Yeah, I just trust Cam Ward more in this game. I have it a little bit closer than you. I have 30-24 Miami. I don't think it'll always be pretty for this Miami team, but I do, because I think that Louisville defensive line could give Cam Ward some problems. That Louisville defensive line, it's really good, but I think Miami is able to pull off the road victory, continuous undefeated start. I think just Cam Ward, I trust him more than Tyler Shuck against two, like I said, vulnerable-ish secondaries that both teams have right now, and I think that Miami will be able to ultimately pull out the victory, which should be a really good game. I'm really looking forward to that one. And another really good game, Dalton, at noon is Nebraska at number 16 Indiana, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. The storyline for me in this one, okay, just how legit is Indiana. So they went 3-9 last year, and they're off to a historic start under first-year head coach Curt Cignetti. Right now, the Hoosiers are 6-0 for the first time since 1967 And they've won those 6 games by an average of 32.7 points. So it's not like they're playing it close in all these games and coming out on top. No, they're blowing everyone out of the water right now. But as good as that start is, and is really good for Indiana, they're already making a bowl game when last year they weren't even close to making a bowl game. Indiana has yet to beat a top 55 team in PFF's power rankings. 4 of those wins have come over schools that are outside the top 85 or in the FCS. Nebraska, they're number 31 in our power ranking right now with a 5-1 record. So this is easily the best team that Indiana's played all year so far.
Absolutely, and it's a huge game when you talk about the Hoosiers' opportunity. Also, I just love that we're covering an Indiana game.
I love it.
Did not think – we thought they would be kind of like, okay, they might make a bowl game. Kurt Cignetti will get them going. We didn't think we'd be previewing a big game like this late in the season. But, no, Cignetti's got them going. I think they execute really well. I do think they're for real, honestly. I think this is going to be a really competitive game one way or the other. And the big thing, I think, too, if you play those teams, cool, but they did dominate them, right?
Yeah.
They took care of business. They've looked really good. Curtis Rourke has looked really good. The entire thing, all the James Madison guys have looked really good. They've got it rolling, and I think this Nebraska team presents a really good challenge for them. It's to me, it's easily the best defense they've played all year. That's going to be the biggest thing. But if they get this win, we're actually talking playoff contention for Indiana. Look, they're already number 16, right? Nebraska's a big win. You get by this team, I think they're better than, I forget who, but it's the next 2 teams they're playing. And then you get Michigan and Ohio State. And I think especially that Michigan game, I'm kind of looking at it like, you know what? If they're 9-0 going into that game, who am I to doubt them to beat a Michigan or maybe even compete with Ohio State? Who knows? I don't know that we know how good this team is, like you mentioned, but they've got a shot. The fact that it's week 8 and we're talking about, we put Indiana and playoffs in the same sentence, that's incredible.
Yeah, even Donnie in the chat saying right now, who would have thought this would have been a big-time game back in August? This is an awesome game right now. It's so cool to see how these 2 programs have done so far this year. And like you said, though, yeah, they have played an easy schedule, but they're not playing it close. They're beating everyone by almost 5 touchdowns right now. This is what you should expect from a really good team, and Indiana's doing that. They're beating everyone, like I said, by an average of 33 points a game. So really, really good for the Indiana Hoosiers so far this year. Dalton, though, you have the Indiana offense led by a quarterback in Curtis Rourke that's one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country. So what should we know when he and the Hoosiers have the ball?
Oh, the Canadian cannon, Curtis Rourke. I'm just making up nicknames.
Love it. No, it's good.
But,
we'll go with it.
I got to be honest, this was a hard one. And you know why? Because there's no gimmicks. There's no trick plays. It's not Wake Forest slow mesh. It's not an academy school running triple. It's not one guy being Superman either. Like if we break down, I don't know, Boise State or something or in Arizona, there's like one guy who's carrying the whole team. That's not the case here. And I'm watching this team and I'm just going, they're playing like everyday football, like just fundamental football, and they're doing it incredibly well. And I'm sitting there watching offensive clip after offensive clip, just what is it? And I was just, something jumped at me. I was like, man, they are so good at these RPOs. Curtis Rourke is so good. And I think because we talk about it like, oh, just about every team runs them to some extent, we kind of take for granted that, yes, it's a part of football, but some teams are better at it than others.
Yeah.
And right now, when Indiana runs an RPO, they're the best offense in the country. Now, level of competition be damned, right? Obviously, it's a thing where it's like, okay, you're playing Northwestern and Maryland and some of these teams. We'll find out this week how good it is. But it is like flawless execution when it comes to the overall grade is first. Curtis Rourke's in the top 20 throwing RPOs, third in EPA per play. First in receiving grade, this receiver group is low.
Really good.
I mean, you're talking about guys, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Miles Price, Miles Cross, and then you got 2 good backs. You got Tyson Lawton, Justice Ellison. They have a lot of weapons, and what that does, as opposed to, let's say, there's some teams that just with that one slot guy, that he's the RPO guy, like he's always running the bubble, he's always running the out. No, they have anybody on the field they could throw to. It could be a slant, an out, a bubble, a skinny post, all sorts of things. Obviously, handing the ball off and running pretty well too. But I'm watching this team and I'm going, man, they never have a negative play on one of these RPOs. It just doesn't happen, whether they hand it off, whether they throw it behind. And I'll tell you what, Curtis Rourke, and he's got so much experience, right? He's been around a long time. He started several years at Ohio. Last year, kind of had some issues coming off an ACL tear. I thought his mechanics weren't totally right. He's throwing the ball the way he did in 2022. The mechanics look right. He's fully recovered. Still wears a knee brace, but he looks like he's actually pushing off and getting into his mechanics throwing. But that's just something I noticed. I think early downs for Nebraska in this game are going to be big. I think the one thing that all those opponents you mentioned haven't done to Indiana is really push the issue and get them in a lot of 3rd and 9s and 3rd and 10s, in part because this RPO game for them, again, It's not anything exotic considering all of the football we know and watch and how modern football is now, right? College or NFL with all these RPOs. But there are some teams that, especially at quarterback, it's like they're better at it. It continues to work, and they constantly make positive plays on early downs with it. You very rarely this year have seen Indiana in a 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. Now, the interesting thing to me, I don't think Indiana has a ton of speed. So you don't see them challenged like way down the field too much, even though Curtis Rourke is capable of those throws. It's a lot of the shorter throws on the RPOs, and their drop back game's a lot of intermediate. So I think if Nebraska can make stops and can be productive, maybe it's press man coverage to throw off the timing. If they can stop the run with just their front, which they have a huge front with Ty Robinson and those guys, especially on their defensive line, we haven't seen a team yet put Indiana in 3rd and longs. I don't even have enough numbers to really make a big judgment on that part. I can tell you when Curtis Rourke has dropped back, he's been really good. It's why he's one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country. But it starts for me here with Indiana with just, I mean, when I tell you, at least against those first 6 opponents, flawless execution in this RPO game, it's a real problem, and they have a lot of weapons. You got 2 good backs, you have a really good quarterback, and you have 4 or 5 really good receivers that can all do things with the ball in their hands. I think early downs are going to be a thing to watch for Indiana's offense. If they get themselves, the other one too I want to throw in there, Nebraska this year, they haven't seen a boatload of RPOs, kind of a below average number, but 92nd in the country in defensive grade against them.
Yeah.
So this is suddenly a big thing where it's maybe strength against weakness. If they pull some of those linebackers up and Nebraska's trying to support the run and you get in behind them, these slants that get in behind linebackers are a huge problem when you're playing Indiana. So Nebraska, I think on early downs against RPOs, that's where this game could be decided. They need to be the first team to put Indiana in some bad situations.
So it's strength against weakness when you say that. Dawn is strength against weakness on the other side of the ball as well, because Dylan Raiola has been outstanding against zone defenses this year, which Indiana runs a lot of. Against zone, he has a 90.2 passing grade. That is 5th among all quarterbacks in the nation. Against man coverage, 44.4 passing grade, basically cut in half, even more than cut in half. That's 132nd in the country. So he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country against zone, one of the worst quarterbacks in the country against man. And when I was watching the tape back and saying, okay, why is he doing so well against zone? Why is he doing so poorly against man? A couple things for Dylan Raiola. One, not the most accurate right now. He's got a big arm, but not the most accurate. And against man coverage, you really got to be accurate, obviously. And sometimes he gets a little flustered with pressure in his face. Obviously, he's a true freshman, so it makes sense. But man coverage, a lot of times coincides with the blitz coming, and you could see him get flustered a little bit too. Well, in zone coverage, he has great poise when he's kept clean, and he just waits back there, and he finds the soft spots in zone coverage. He finds the open receiver in zone coverage. That's where he really excels. Also, I want to point out the Nebraska receivers don't really separate all that well either. So against man coverage, that weakness is really showing up even more and highlighted even more. Against zone coverage, you can find the soft spots. And again, Raiola is going to find the open receiver if you give him time back there to find the soft spots in zone coverage. So he is excellent against zone coverage, and he has not been good at all against man coverage. But the issue for Indiana is they run zone coverage more than almost any team in the country right now. Indiana has run zone coverage on 160 passing plays this year. That's a top 10 mark in the country. On the other side, they've run man coverage on only 20 snaps this year. That's tied for the second fewest in the Power 4. So it'll be really interesting for me to see if defensive coordinator Brian Haynes switches it up this week against Raiola and runs a lot more zone coverage than we're used to. But if he sticks to what they've done all year, I think that Dylan Raiola has a big advantage against this Indiana defense.
I could see it. I mean, and it's always interesting that week to week to see if they find these things and go, you know what, we can match up with these receivers. And you got guys like D'Angelo Pons on the outside, right? Who you go, well, you know what, maybe this week we match it up, or we just go a little bit more just to confuse them, or maybe they disguise it, or there's always, or you mentioned the blitzing too, where it's like you could find different answers. But I think that's a great call. And with Raiola, you know, if it's all those zone coverages, you mentioned a 4-man rush.
Yep.
We've talked about how comfortable he gets. When he's really in a rhythm, he's comfortable. He's definitely got poise beyond his years, right? Even as a true freshman. I think you make a very good point. There's a lot of variables on both sides of the ball in this game where you know, it's Indiana's first like big game. And then Nebraska, they're making adjustments every week and they're trying to figure it out. It's still pretty young on offense, especially with him. But this is going to be a fun one because I think there's a lot that we know about these two teams, but it still feels like there's a lot that we don't know, and that's the hardest part of predicting this game.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, in this big game, in Indiana's first real test of the 2024 season, will they pass it, and will they continue their magical undefeated run, or will Nebraska play spoiler on Saturday?
I have them passing it, and the more I watch them, I go, again, there's no frills to it. It's RPO heavy, sure, and I think their defense is pretty good too. And you got all those guys, Mikael Kamara's playing great, D'Angelo Ponge, Jalen Walker, name all the James Madison guys. C.J. Westo, transfer, I believe it was from Kent State. He's playing really good in the run up front. That's a guy who's going to be key to stopping the run in this game. Indiana, I actually do think they're really good. I just see this depth of talent that they haven't had in years. I mean, I know they had Michael Penix back then for a stretch, but that team wasn't real deep. This is a deep football team that executes really well. Obviously, we got to see them step up, but I think it helps that they're at home. It helps. I watched Curtis Rourke, and you can see all of the experience that he has in his career. And I know it was in the MAC, it was at Ohio, but look, 2022, he was the highest graded quarterback in the country. He was if off of that 2022 tape alone, I think he's a 4th or 5th round pick. I do. I think he's a guy who's really underrated in the hierarchy, even of these draft quarterbacks. I've got Indiana 31-27. I think they're going to find enough points here. They're really good on offense. I think they're going to be good enough on defense. They're going to have to be – the trenches are the interesting part to me because I think this is the biggest test for their offensive line. Their offensive line has played well. The scheme helps them out a lot. They're really high in pass blocking grade. They had a great day in pass protection against Northwestern last week, but this Nebraska front is really big. I'm curious if Indiana can find enough balance in the run game or if this game's going to be on Curtis Rourke. But I believe in Rourke. I believe what Cignetti's doing over there. He's got him executing at a high level. Indiana 31, Nebraska 27.
So you have a 1-game lead on me in our picks right now. I'm going to try to make it up right here. I'm going with Nebraska. I'm picking Nebraska to win this game 28-24. The more tape I watched, I just was so impressed by Dylan Raiola. And yes, the grade speaks for itself against zone coverage, but when you watch him, man, he just looks so comfortable. And if you give that kid time back there, he is going to dice you up. And Indiana, the fact that it wasn't even like, oh, they run man coverage at an average rate. No, they don't run man coverage at all. That, to me, is a really big advantage for Nebraska in this game. And you mentioned the defensive line on the other side of the ball. Indiana has not played a defensive line like that yet. And I think that could create a lot of issues. It created issues for Colorado in that game when Nebraska dominated them in that one. So I got Nebraska in a very, very close game. I can totally see it going the other way too. But I think that Raiola against that zone defense and the defense on the other side of the ball, they're going to spoil the Hoosiers' undefeated season. And we've seen Nebraska play big games before, right? They played Colorado. They played Illinois. This is the first time Indiana's getting tested right now. So if you punch them in the mouth, how will they respond? They haven't got punched in the mouth yet. And I think Nebraska definitely will at least get one haymaker in there in this game. So I think Nebraska will win in a very, very close one. But it's going to be an awesome, awesome game at noon that we'll be watching in the press box in the Miami-Louisville game. We'll have that up on our laptops for sure because it is going to be a really must-see game, honestly. Though another must-see game is number 7 Alabama at number 11 Tennessee, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. And really, the storyline to know, these are two teams that are kind of mirror images of each other right now because just 2 weeks ago, Alabama and Tennessee was number 1 for Alabama. Tennessee was number 4 in the AP poll. Now, 2 weeks later, they're both outside of the top 5 with the Volunteers. They're outside the top 10 right now because over the last 2 weeks, both of them have been very uninspiring right now. They both fell to unranked opponents in Week 6. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, even though they were 22.5-point favorites. Tennessee lost to Arkansas, even though they were 14.5-point favorites. And then last weekend, again, against unranked SEC teams, they both barely squeaked by as well. Alabama trailed in the fourth quarter to South Carolina before barely squeaking by with a 2-point victory. They were 19.5-point favorites at home in that game. The Volunteers went to overtime with Florida, again, at Tennessee. They were home in that game as well, and they pulled off a 23-17 win despite being nearly 2 touchdown favorites in that game. So the winner of this game really gets the season back on track, while the loser of it, after the last 2 weeks and how they've looked, their playoff chances kind of go into free fall a little bit.
Yeah, the playoff implications here are off the charts because you're talking about then the loser of this game gets a second loss, and if we've been thinking if you get a third loss, you're certainly out, and even if you get a second, especially with an unranked loss and some shaky wins on the schedule, especially for Tennessee, it really hasn't looked great in SEC play at all, especially offensively. These are the matchups when you start talking about these have serious consequences when it comes to this 12-team playoff. And a big win has real consequences too, right? For whoever comes out the winner, you're talking about staying in that top 8 to 10, sitting in there, okay, now we got through one of our big games, right? And I just think this is a game we're going to look back on, I think, come Selection Sunday and be like, okay, or Tuesday. Is it Sunday, Monday? I forget what day of the week. It's Selection Sunday.
I think it's Sunday. Yeah,
it is Sunday.
Right after conference championship.
I'm used to that with college basketball too. I'm like, right, it's on a Sunday. But this is a game we're going to look back on for both these teams, and the winner of this game is going to be at a huge advantage.
Absolutely. I just think it's so funny how they're basically doing the exact same thing as each other the last 2 weeks. They both lost to unranked teams a couple weeks ago. Both barely got by last week too. So we'll see in this one. And Dalton, also another thing that they share similarities in. Both passing games kind of come and go at times. So go into the Tennessee one a little bit. How does Nico Iamaleava really improve off what's been, again, an uninspiring start so far?
Yeah, so this one's been going a little bit more than it's been coming. I mean, look, you can look at the surface level stuff and say, okay, well, Tennessee scores over 40 points a game. They must be really good. Well, that's really heavily weighted towards their out-of-conference schedule, right? 2 lower teams and then beating up on NC State. When they've been in SEC play, you're just not seeing a whole lot clicking, right? They're winning with Dylan Sampson, and they're winning with their defense. And their defense, I think, has been far better than we expected it to be. But this offense has to get it going. And honestly, it's Nico Iamaleava. Like, it's really him. We're seeing the youth. And I think I watch him, and I see certain balls that, he might see the read and he just doesn't let go of for some reason, or just tentative when it comes to making decisions or wanting to take off and run. And then the certain times he does make decisions and the accuracy is just off. He's just not in a great rhythm right now, right? He was, he had the big week 1 against Chattanooga. That's an FCS team, but especially over the last 3 weeks in SEC play, 64.4 passing grade, 3 turnover-worthy plays in the last 3 weeks, 6.9 yards per attempt. And it's that last number there that I want to get into. Without play action, a 44.7 passing grade. And I know there's a lot of play action in this offense anyway, but it seems like the percentage is even more than usual. Max, they're running play action on over 58% of their plays, of their pass plays, which I'm pretty sure that's more than last year. And I know this, again, there's a lot of RPOs, a lot of play action. It's a lot about running the ball and tempo and all of that. But Tennessee right now, at least from what we've seen the last 3 weeks, they just don't have a drop back passing game. Yeah. And this is a real problem when you talk about sometimes you have to fall behind, right? Or you don't have to fall behind, but I'm saying, like, if you're playing from behind, you got to drop back and throw the football, right? The great quarterbacks, I say it all the time, when everyone in the stadium knows you're throwing, can you throw it? Right now, Tennessee cannot do that, and you have a problem with that if you don't set up Alabama, right? And Alabama, they struggled a bit on defense the last couple weeks, right? There's been some big plays. Second half of the Georgia game, the Vandy game was an issue because here's the thing, though. Here's why Vandy was an issue. Everything's set up, right? There's so many layers, right? Tennessee's offense doesn't look like it has layers right now, and the problem is when, Alabama's secondary, okay, their defense, when there's not play action, okay, they still have the 4th best coverage grade in the country. If they know you're throwing and you're not setting them up with play action and say all the stuff that Vandy and Diego Pavia were doing and everything's doesn't have those layers, it's a problem. It's a real problem. You don't want to just still be throwing into the teeth of this Alabama defense when it's 3rd and 10. So, look, I understand that Tennessee, they've been getting by playing defense, giving up not very many points a game, right? Even the game they lost, they only gave up 19 points, right? I understand they have to stay in the wheelhouse in its defense and run game, but eventually Nico has to give them something in the drop-back game. It can't just be, okay, one read, play action. Like, I know he's young. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing just a guy who, I don't think mechanically there's anything wrong. He's obviously an amazing athlete, all that stuff, but I'm seeing a guy who's just incredibly young. Yeah. And when they ask him for more than that one read or more than just what the system tells him to do, it's not there right now. And I think if they fell behind in this game, they're going to have a big problem because I'm not sure, especially under pressure. He's got a 29.8 passing grade under pressure. Yeah. It's not great. Actually, over the last 3 weeks, I believe he has the lowest overall grade in non-play action in the country. So it's just, if they need to get ahead, they need to get the run game going early because I have no proof right now that Nico's going to turn it around in this game specifically.
No, and listen, Tennessee's 56th in pass blocking grade and Alabama's 24th in pass rushing grade, right? So that if he's under pressure again, he's really been bad under pressure too. That's another thing that's really been going against him in this season so far. On the side of the ball, to make sure they don't get ahead, you gotta limit the big plays from Jalen Milroe. And we saw this last week. South Carolina did an excellent job, and why they almost won that game was because on 10-plus yard throws last week, Jalen Milroe was 4 for 8 for 92 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, right? 55.8 grade on 10-plus yard throws last week. So they did a great job taking that away and forcing him to be methodical. You got to force Jalen Milroe to be methodical because he is a big play waiting to happen because he's got elite mobility and a rocket launcher of an arm. He has probably the best physical tools of any quarterback in college football right now. So far this year, he has 14 runs of 10-plus yards. That's top 15 among all quarterbacks in the nation. He has 604 passing yards and 7 touchdowns on deep throws, 20-plus yard throws. That's each top 5 in the nation. Tennessee, so far this year, top 5 run defense grade in the country, 91.9 grade. They've only allowed 2.8 yards per carry to opposing quarterbacks, so they can maybe contain Jalen Milroe a little bit. And on 20-plus yard throws, the Volunteers are 20th in EPA per play among Power 4 schools. But it's safe to say they have not faced a quarterback who's even close to as dynamic as Jalen Milroe. So all those stats are great. Yes, Tennessee's offense has been great, and Taylon Green has some moments against them, right? Taylon Green really had some moments against them, and you got even a more souped-up version of Taylon Green in this one in Jalen Milroe, right? So I'm really looking forward to watching that. Another match I'm looking forward to watching is that Tennessee defensive line against the Alabama offensive line, because Tennessee's defensive line, again, the run D has been great. The pass rushing's been really good as well. And then Alabama's offensive line, I mean, they were really good against South Carolina last week. And South Carolina's got an elite defensive line, and Alabama's offensive line stonewalled them, really. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that matchup as well. But ultimately, what's going to win or lose this game for Tennessee and Alabama is, can you make Jalen Milroe be methodical? And yes, he did it against Georgia. He was really good at doing that against Georgia, but the deep throws were still there against Georgia. Can you be like South Carolina and completely take away those deep throws? Because then you have a really good chance of beating them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do we want Eli's thoughts on these?
We have to get it
real quick. We want to get that real quick before the prediction.
Before our prediction, Eli, as a Tennessee fan right now, how do you feel going into this major game?
Don't feel too good, to be honest. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I really don't think there's going to be a lot. I mean, I just feel like Milroe and Nico have not been playing well. So I think it's going to be low-scoring. I got to go with the Vols.
Okay.
I like the +3. I think it's going to be low-scoring. I didn't see what the over-under's at. I'm going to go something like 24-21.
Okay. Fair score.
I think that's fair, and I'll tell you what, he makes a great point there. I think if the score does get above that range, I think Tennessee does have problems.
Yeah.
I don't think they can score a ton of points right now. It's just not working enough in the passing game. That sort of pace, that sort of game, kind of the same pace that eventually Alabama, South Carolina got to, or we've seen actually from several SEC games last week and lately. Some of these bigger games have been lower scoring than we thought. I think about even LSU Ole Miss last week. We thought there was going to be 100 points put up in that game, and it was, 23-16?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, for a long time in that game. So I think he's absolutely right. Right now, I don't think we expected this before the season, but Tennessee's winning with their defense, and they're going to have to continue to do that.
So, Dalton, in this massive game, who gets a much-needed bounce back, and who sees their playoff odds get significantly hurt?
I'm taking Bama. I think Jalen Milroe is the best player on either side of the field. I think we're going to see a little more of Ryan Williams than we did last week, because I thought last week was, you could feel it, that Ryan Williams had a quiet day against South Carolina. And that South Carolina defense, that's an elite defense. I mean, I'll be honest with you, that's a tough defense to go against. Milroe made some mistakes early, especially late in the second quarter in that game, but I think he's going to be good enough to win this game. I know Tennessee's defense is really good, but I just struggle to see, if this game gets beyond roughly that score that Eli mentioned, how Tennessee is going to keep up. It feels to me like Alabama would want to go in there and play with pace, maybe take shots early, or maybe get into the running game with Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, but I've got Alabama 30-20. I just don't think Tennessee has enough through the air to match Milroe.
Yeah, I'm going with Alabama 28-24. I think Milroe's deep ball comes and goes, but Iamaleava just hasn't really been there, right?
It's just gone.
Gone right now, right? So that's the thing, is like, I trust Milroe more than Iamaleava, who again is very, very talented. I'm not selling my stock or anything like that on the kid. He's very, very talented, but he's also very, very young. But there's an opportunity there for him, because the one thing we haven't talked about yet, Alabama's secondary has proven that they are young as well, right? They have a lot of young players in that secondary, and Vanderbilt exposed them in that win over Alabama. I think there's an opportunity there for Nico to do the same thing, right? So, but I'm going to take Alabama in this one in a very, very close game, and I think Tennessee's playoff hopes go a little bit on life support. I'm not saying it's completely over for them at all. If they go 10-2, they probably still get into the college football playoff, but you pretty much have to win out if you lose this game. For almost either of these teams, you got to win out if you lose this game. So, yeah, I think Alabama's going to win this one in a very, very close one, though, 28-24, unfortunately, for our guy Eli back there. Don, let's go to our next game we're talking about, another 3:30 game. That is number 24, Michigan, at number 22, Illinois, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. Storylines to know, this is Michigan's third starting quarterback in 7 games. The defending national champs have been scrambling to find a replacement for J.J. McCarthy all year, and head coach Ron Moore confirmed this week that 7th-year quarterback Jack Tuttle will be making his first career start since the 2022 season, when he was actually at Indiana while he was there against Illinois this week. He was inserted last week against Washington a couple weeks ago against Washington, Wolverine's last game, when Alex Orji was benched, and Jack Tuttle had a 42.8 grade against Washington in that loss for Michigan. So Tuttle, like I said, is the third starting signal caller for Michigan. Davis Warren was first. Alex Orji was second. Jack Tuttle now third. Time will tell if they'll give any kind of spark for what's essentially a non-existent passing game. But if you looked at what he did 2 weeks ago against Washington with a 43 grade pretty much, you're pretty pessimistic about that. So we'll see what he does in this one, but Michigan will be starting a new starting quarterback again for the third time in 7 games now.
Yeah, they're certainly reaching for straws, aren't they? I mean, they've tried the Alex Orji run the ball every play thing. They tried a traditional-ish passer in Davis Warren. Now they're going to try an experienced one in Jack Tuttle, who made a couple good throws against Washington, but I think the key there is you just can't turn the football over, right? And that's what really hurt him in that game. Yeah, I mean, Michigan, they're trying. They're trying to balance this thing out because they can run the ball. We know they can run the ball. The O-line's getting a little bit better in run blocking, and obviously Mullings and Edwards are dangerous, but you can't continue to be last in the Power 5 in passing yards per game. I think it's less than 100 yards a game they're getting through the air. So they're trying to find it. And look, this is a team Illinois that they're a good football team, and they're an aggressive defense. And I guarantee you, they're gonna try to at least stack the box and make Tuttle beat them.
So before we get to the matchups, I think this is a good conversation to have. Who would you go with right now out of everyone you've seen, or would you even go with the kid, Jaden Davis? Jaden Davis, I know you're not a big recruit guy, but Jaden Davis is a top 10 quarterback coming out of high school. Would you even try the kid out and see what he's got out there?
I got to be honest, from what we've seen from all 3 of them, I would probably just stick with Orji and just run some sort of option-oriented offense. I think that it's really, if you're just not going to have a passing game with any of them, then go with the best runner. Look, it worked in the USC game. It wasn't working early in the Washington game. It felt a little odd that they did make the switch at that moment. They're just... It's not just the quarterbacks, too. The pass protection's been rough. They replaced the entire offensive line in the offseason. They lost so much production outside, where Colson Loveland's really only their only legitimate passing weapon, right? So it's not just the quarterbacks. To me, look, it's a grind. It's going to be hard for them to make the playoff and get through the rest of the season. They have a tough schedule down the stretch, but it probably is, look, just put Orji in there and run the ball. But they're going to give it a shot. They're going to still try to find a passing game and figure this thing out. And yeah, I get it. It's hard to be one-dimensional. It's hard to be that one-dimensional for sure.
Listen, they see it in practice, so maybe he's not ready. I would probably start Orji as well. I think I'm with you there. But I think what Davis Warren has shown this year, like, he's been okay at least. Like, there's been a lot of moments where he's not been good, but like there's been moments like, okay, this is like passable at least. So maybe he's the best passer on the team. And then also there's part of me that's like, dude, you got a 4-star quarterback who's a true freshman. Just see what he's got. And it's got to be maybe close to what you have right now.
I wonder if you might see Davis once they really feel like, okay, we're out of the playoff picture.
Yeah.
And once the games
look ahead to next year.
Don't give him all that pressure and look ahead to next year, so it doesn't matter quite as much, But I wouldn't want to throw Davis in there against Oregon with your season on the line. That feels unfair to the kid, right? So yeah. I think if and when the games don't matter as much, then you might see Davis, but they're going to keep trying to find a solution to stay in this as long as they only have 2 losses.
Definitely. So let's flip over to the other side of the ball, Dawn. You have the Illinois offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
Yeah, honestly, this is kind of a recap of what we've talked about with the main points of both of these teams, right? And it's that Illinois, we'll start with Illinois because we've had them a little less than Michigan. We'll rewind this, is that they added 2 big-time offensive tackles in the transfer portal, right? J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley. And last year, their offensive line was their biggest problem. This year, it's really been a strength, right? And they've gotten a lot better in pass protection. Luke Altmaier has the 10th best clean pocket passing grade in the country. Now, what you're getting, though, is they've been really good in all their games in pass protection. Their offense has looked really good. Except one. Except for that Penn State game where they scored on the very first drive and then did not score again, and they had a 24.9 pass blocking grade in that game, as all your guys, Abdul Carter and Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton, the one really elite pass rush that they played, dominated them. Right? And look,
80% pass rush win rate, right?
It was something gross like that. I mean, and it was dominant. And Penn State right now, they're 7th in pass rush grade, which sounds about right for Penn State. Michigan's number 1. And as we've talked about this Michigan defensive line all year, we talk about the offense and the quarterbacks and the run game and all. Michigan's front 4 on defense is the reason they win ball games. You could easily argue it's the best defensive line in the country. It's Mason Graham that you see right there. It's big Kenneth Grant, number 78. Josiah Stewart is the highest graded defensive player in the country right now off the edge. Derek Moore is really good. Rayshon Benny's really good. This defensive line is the reason they win games. And if they win this game, it'll be the reason they win this game, because they'll have dominated Illinois' offensive line just like Penn State did, and it'll probably be something like 21-7 again, right? This is where Illinois, if they feel like they need to do it, if they can block this front 4 at all, they have a shot. Because Altmaier's been good. He is good. He's a good quarterback. Pat Bryant, good on the outside. Zachary Franklin's good on the outside, right? They've got players on the outside. They've got a passing game they can work with. The difference for Altmaier to me in this game, here you want a stat real quick. Against Michigan, opponents, their opponents so far have an average time to throw of 2.4 seconds. They know they can't block them. What they do is get rid of the ball, okay? And this Michigan coverage unit is not as good as they were last year. They're just not. It's their coverage grade is down somewhere in the 50s. It's like 58th or somewhere around there. Will Johnson's obviously great. The depth in the secondary and the depth of this coverage unit is not there.
They're missing Rod Moore a lot.
They're missing Rod Moore a lot. Obviously, Keon Sabb leaving. Younger guys at that other cornerback spot away from Will Johnson. We saw when they played Texas, just don't throw at Will Johnson. Just don't do it. It's the mistake Miller Moss made. It's the mistake even back when they were playing Fresno State that they made. Just don't throw at Will Johnson. And get rid of the ball quickly before those guys, those big monsters that are first in pass rush win rate, so they can't get there. Luke Altmaier, though, the only difference between him and Will Rogers does get rid of the ball, right? We're talking about Washington beating Michigan. It was something in the 2.1s that he had for a time to throw. I mean, but that's what he's been doing his whole career. Luke Altmaier's time to throw right now is 3 seconds. That's too long. You don't have 3 seconds against Michigan. You just don't. You got to get rid of the ball quicker. It can't be 3-2, 3-5. You hold the ball that long, you're going to be on your back, right? So it's a matter of if they can protect Altmaier at all, and if he can get rid of the ball, because sometimes it is about your quarterback helping your offensive line as opposed to the other way around. This is a moment where Altmaier needs to make even quicker decisions than he usually does. And Michigan's D-line, if he doesn't, could just take this game over. It's the same exact theory I had against Washington, but Will Rogers got rid of the football. Can Altmaier do that? Can he get it to open guys? Because, again, Michigan's depth and coverage is not as good as it was last year.
And honestly, Altmaier, too, and we talked about this in the Penn State preview with them, is that Altmaier, his splits when he's kept clean versus under pressure is drastic. Like, he is one of the best quarterbacks in America when he's kept clean. He's not very good under pressure, right? So that's a major thing as well. Is that if that Michigan defensive line creates consistent pressure like Penn State did, you can make Luke Altmaier look not great out there. That's exactly what Penn State did and why Penn State was able to dominate in that game. And Michigan's got an opportunity to do the same thing defensively in this one. And the other side of the ball, Dalton, you have a clear advantage for Michigan on the defensive side of the ball. They got an advantage on the offensive side of the ball too, because Illinois' run D has not been great this year. And listen, Michigan really is living and dying by the run game, which especially in this game, that's why I probably would have started Alex Orji to add even more to that run game. But they're starting Jack Tuttle, but even with Jack Tuttle in there, they've got an advantage with this run game right now. They run the ball this year on 55.8% of their plays. That's the 4th highest rate in the Power 4. Kalel Mullings has been the star in that run game. He has a 90.6 rushing grade this year. That is 3rd among FBS backs, 11 carries of 10-plus yard runs as well. Illinois, Dawn, has the worst run defense grade in the Power 4 at a 61.2 run defense grade. They have allowed 5.4 yards per carry. That's the 7th highest rate in the Power 4. They're pretty good at not allowing running backs to break too many tackles, but the issue is they give up 2.1 yards before contact per attempt, which is the 9th most in the Power 4. So maybe in this game, when you don't have to worry about an elite passing game, like Penn State has a really good passing game, you don't got to worry about that, right? So maybe you could stack the box more and have an easier time of contacting the ball carriers earlier and bringing them down earlier. But Kalel Mullings has shown the capability to win games on his own before. That, I think, is the matchup to here, is that Illinois' run D has really been bad this year, and Michigan offensively, they're just going to run the ball. That's just what their offense is right now because they don't have a consistent pass game to speak of. So I think Michigan, at least on the offensive side of the ball, has an advantage if Illinois' run D is as bad as they've been all year.
Yeah, no, and when you mention that yards before contact stat, that tells me their defensive line is not getting it done at the first level, right? They're not plugging holes. They're not allowing their linebackers to fill in these gaps. They're not getting it done up front. So it is a good opportunity then for Michigan's offensive line to really just move people, right? Just create space up front. And look, all Michigan's trying to do is get 5 yards a clip. They're not. I know Mullings has broken off a couple of big runs. We know Donovan Edwards can break off some big runs, but they're trying to get 5-6 yards at a time, and they're trying to slow this game down and just play at their pace and keep time of possession and just be the more physical football team. They definitely. I think this is the problem for Illinois. Is it feels like for as much as Michigan has struggled, even especially offensively, it kind of feels like Michigan's the more physical team in this game. That's a big problem for Illinois.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, who wins this game in Champaign, Illinois, and who moves up a little bit in the top 25?
I'm going to take – I fell for it last time against Washington, but I'm going to take Michigan again in this one, even though that one turned out to be a mini mistake. They didn't execute. Washington won the fourth quarter, but I'm going to take Michigan 20-16. I think they do drag it into just that ugly game that we're used to Michigan playing, and I just can't get the idea out of my head that Illinois against Penn State, after that first drive, had a great first drive. They didn't score the rest of the game, and Penn State kind of did it, right? They didn't get a lot of explosives, right? Illinois' pass defense is good. It's a lot of man coverage. Penn State kind of used Nick Singleton to just grind them down slowly, and their defense and their pass rush just kept taking more and more of Illinois' confidence from them as the game went on, to where it did feel like all of a sudden when Penn State got a 2-score lead, it really felt like the game was just done. Even at 14-7, when it was like that for a long time, it just felt like, man, Illinois, I don't know how they're going to get points because they just can't protect, right? And if you can't protect against Penn State, pretty good chance you can't protect against Michigan unless you're really changing things, getting rid of the ball quicker, and maybe you got some tricks up your sleeve. But I'm going to take Michigan. I think this game gets dragged down to their speed, 20-16.
I'm going Michigan as well. I got 24-21. I think the defensive line is going to dominate, just like Penn State's did. And then you even saw in the Penn State game, too, Nick Singleton and other guys, and Katron Aller, able to have some big runs against them. I think Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards are going to do the same thing as well, take advantage of a vulnerable Illinois run defense. So it'll be close, 24-21. I have it. And I do think there's an opportunity there for Illinois' run defense to be a little bit better just because you know what's coming, right? For Penn State, you didn't really know what was going to happen to you. And Nebraska, you didn't really know if they're going to run the ball or not. Michigan, you know they're going to run the ball, right? So that could be an advantage for Illinois, but at the same time, they've really struggled at run defense this year. And with that defensive line against that offensive line and how bad Luke Altmaier has been under pressure throughout his entire career, honestly, I got to go with Michigan in this one, 24-21. Let's go to our next game, which is another 3:30 p.m. game, a loaded 3:30 slate that we got. It is number 12 Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech. It's actually a neutral site game in Atlanta, so kind of is a home environment for Georgia Tech because they are in Atlanta, but it'll be played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the home of the Atlanta Falcons. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time game on ESPN. Storyline to know, and this is basically the storyline for every Notre Dame game until they lose again, can they continue walking the tightrope right now? So they've really rebounded nicely from their Week 2 loss to Northern Illinois, but their backs are still against the wall in the college football playoff race because Notre Dame has to clinch. If they're going to make the playoff, it has to be an at-large spot. They're not in a conference, so they can't clinch a conference championship spot. So it's got to be one of the 7 at-large spots in the 12-team field. And a 10-2 record, just looking at their schedule, might not be enough, right? They do have some decent teams left on their schedule, like Army and Navy and Georgia Tech, obviously, as well, and USC at the very end of the year. But a 10-2 record against other teams that are 10-2 that might not be enough right now. So that basically leaves Notre Dame with no other option but to win out right now, to guarantee a spot. Because an 11-1 Notre Dame is guaranteed a spot in the 12-team playoff. So they basically have to win out. But according to PFF's power rankings, Dalton, Georgia Tech is the second best team the Fighting Irish have remaining, making this game a really, really critical bar to clear for Notre Dame right now.
It is. Georgia Tech, we've seen it. I know they've lost a couple of games, but look, this is a good football team, and they're an explosive football team. And I think we saw it. We've seen it from the first game of the year against Florida State when, we thought Florida State was better, right? But I think you've got a team that's very dangerous for Notre Dame here. Georgia Tech's defense is improved. Look, they're 5-2 and a very competitive 5-2. Explosive run game. Look, the one thing that sticks out to me is Haynes King last year led the Power 5 in interceptions, right? He's got one turnover-worthy play this season. The improvement from Haynes King. He's playing clean football now while still keeping that same explosiveness that he's always had. You've got a dangerous game here, and I'm still, for me, in the grand scheme, I still need to see Notre Dame's offense has looked better in more recent games, but they've also been playing teams like Stanford, teams like Purdue, who aren't really up to par with that. So I think we're going to find out if Georgia Tech makes a couple explosive plays, if Notre Dame can now keep up offensively against a good team like this.
So speaking of that Georgia Tech offense, you have that side of the ball in this one. So what should we be looking out for in the Yellow Jackets of the ball?
Well, we've done this before. The story is always, right, my favorite Atlanta law firm, right, Haynes and Haynes, right, Haynes King and Jamal Haynes in the run game. And we've talked about how it's kind of like this loose option attack, and they've got all the jet sweeps, and they got everything. You've got Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton outside. And I'll tell you, first thing before I get into the main thing, it's going to be big that Notre Dame in this game, especially that they lost Ben Morrison for the season.
Huge.
You talk about Singleton and Rutherford, one of the better pairs of receivers in the country. You have Rutherford, everything after the catch. Singleton can win downfield. I think that is going to be a big factor. But the bigger one to me, Georgia Tech, great run game, fantastic between the tackles this year, right? It's not just that they get out in space and hit the sidelines and do all the fast things. Got 5.8 yards per carry between the tackles this year, okay? And this is kind of weird. Also, real quick, only 3 teams in the country have more explosive runs between the tackles, too. You saw Jamal Haynes' game-winning touchdown against North Carolina. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking at. But this has kind of been a problem for Notre Dame, is stopping the run. And their interior players, some of their stars are not playing as well as last year. Right now, Notre Dame is 49th in the country in run D grade. But that's because they had a great game against Stanford last week, and Stanford can't run the ball. Before last week against Stanford, they were like 81st.
Yeah.
It's been a problem. And to me, look at the star players, and this is why I'm looking at these guys that really play between the tackles here. Howard Cross, 61 run D grade. Last year, I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around 83. Riley Mills, a 63. He was in the 70s last year. Jack Kaiser was one of the highest graded linebackers in the country. He's got a 69.4 run defense grade. It just has not been the same physically when you talk about Notre Dame's star players and stopping the run. Their front seven, with most of the same characters, just hasn't been the same. And you look at them in total on runs between the tackles, they're 107th in the country in run defense grade. If Georgia Tech gets into I talk about it all the time, let a team get in their wheelhouse, let them get comfortable, and they'll beat you. Georgia Tech is one of those teams. They are not afraid to go out and run for 350 yards on somebody. They will do it. And Haynes King, they'll win a game that Haynes King only throws 10 times. They do not care. We've seen other games, the Louisville game where he came out and played well throwing the ball, but Louisville stopped the run in that game. That's really the only game where the run got stopped, right, for Georgia Tech. This Notre Dame front seven is not, or the front four especially, is not Louisville. It's not. And Georgia Tech, if I'm telling you right now, this has the same feel to actually every Georgia Tech game has this feel, but especially when we were talking about that first one and we previewed that Florida State game, I was like, don't let them get to the stuff that they want to get to. Then you get to the play action shots when if you got guys like Xavier Watts coming up and doing all that. I just think this is a problem right now. And look, Notre Dame's great in coverage. They're still going to be pretty good in coverage, but Ben Morrison's a huge loss, right? But the run defense has not been quite what it was last year. Last year, they were really good in run defense. Obviously, they were an elite coverage unit, but these guys in the middle of their defense, I'm looking for Cross and Mills and Jack Kaiser at linebacker to step up because their highest graded run defender in the front seven is Drake Bowen, their other linebacker. And their 3 highest graded players in run defense on their team are all defensive backs. this is kind of getting to be a thing where it's like the secondary is maybe carrying more of a load than they should. And if Georgia Tech gets in their wheelhouse with again, Haynes, and then they take shots with Singleton and screens with Rutherford and all that stuff without Ben Morrison, this is a real problem. Georgia Tech, I'm going to be honest with you, they can score 40-plus points on almost any team in the country if you let them.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at the Notre Dame secondary too, Dalton. Without Ben Morrison, who is one of the best corners in the country, and it still is going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Even with this hip injury, I still think he's going to be a first-round pick because that's how good he's been his entire career. But you look at that, Xavier Watts has been outstanding this year, one of the best safeties in America. And we're actually doing a midseason All-American team, and I think Xavier Watts will be one of those safeties. Jordan Clark has been one of the best slot corners / outside corners that we have in college football as well. Jordan Clark has been really good. But now that Ben Morrison's hurt, you're starting probably at outside corner. Christian Gray, who's already been a starter this year, he's a sophomore. And then Leonard Moore is projected to start at the other one. He's a true freshman. So you got a young secondary. And the other safety is Aiden Schuler, who's a redshirt freshman. It's a young secondary that they have right now. So it's really – Jordan Clark is an older player. He's been great this year. And Xavier Watts, obviously, is an older player and has been great this year. But outside of them, the other three players that are starting are really, really young. So I think that's another key thing to look at in the Notre Dame secondary, especially now with Ben Morrison now done for the year, their best player in that secondary. My side of the ball, Notre Dame, really is interesting to look at this because it's strength for Notre Dame against strength for Georgia Tech. Weakness for Notre Dame against weakness for Georgia Tech. So right now, the Fighting Irish are an outstanding rushing team. They have a top 10 rushing grade in the nation. Jeremiah Love, Riley Leonard as well. Riley Leonard is one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the nation. Love leads the nation with a 47% forced miss tackle rate so far this year. And honestly, Dawn, any rushing stat that is not led by Ashton Ginty, that shows you, this guy is also playing really well. So the fact that Jeremiah Love leads the nation in broken tackle rate when Ashton Ginty's second, by the way, obviously, because Ashton Ginty is either first or second in any stat in rushing.
He's probably offended that he's second now that you said that. He's going to try to be first after next week. He will be.
Yeah. The Michael Myers stance he's going to have and get first next week. But yeah, right now, Jeremiah Love, 47% forced tackle rate that leads the nation. Riley Leonard is fourth in the Power 4 for quarterbacks with 425 rushing yards. And their offensive line is 22nd in run blocking grade so far this year. And so far as a team, Notre Dame is 7th in EPA per run. So by all accounts, they are an elite rushing team. Georgia Tech, though, really, really good in run defense. They are 26th in run defense grade this year, and they're also 26th in yards per attempt allowed. So you got a strength in Notre Dame against a strength in Georgia Tech. On the passing side, though, Notre Dame hasn't been as good. They're 6-6 right now in EP per pass, so really an average passing game, and they've struggled to consistently generate an aerial attack all year. Right now, Notre Dame, 78th in passing grade, 70th in receiving grade, 104th in pass blocking grade as a team. Nothing has really worked great in this passing game right now, from the quarterback to the receivers to the offensive line. Nothing is clicking right now, but Georgia Tech has a 62.8 defensive grade on passing plays, which is 114th in the country. They have the third worst pass rushing grade in America, and they're 102nd in coverage grade as well. So Georgia Tech is very vulnerable against passing offenses. Really good run defense, though. And then Notre Dame, passing offense has not been great this year, but their run game has been great. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the strength of the Notre Dame offense against the strength of Georgia Tech's defense. And then can one of the weaknesses win out in this one too? It's going to be a really, really interesting matchup to look at in this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think a crucial factor is going to be against a better team than they've played the last couple weeks. If Riley Leonard can make maybe just 2 or 3 explosive plays through the air, right? Notre Dame, that's been the problem for the most part, is finding those shots downfield. I think one of the big catalysts of their win was that big early touchdown that he threw up the seam that they set up very well with play action and all that. If they can find just 2 or 3 explosives, just so not everything is such a grind for them, because it can be like that for Notre Dame where it's like, man, they really work 4 yards at a time with this. If they can take a couple shots downfield against, you mentioned it, a vulnerable Georgia Tech secondary that's made a lot of mistakes this year, then I think that balance really helps Notre Dame.
A vulnerable secondary, and also they have no pass rush, 0 pass rush right now, and Notre Dame's offensive line, as good as they are in the run game, they're almost equally as bad in pass blocking right now as well, right? So it's a really interesting matchup on all sides. There's just strength on strength and weakness on weakness. So Dalton, ultimately, who wins this game? Does Notre Dame continue their playoff hopes, or do they suffer a potentially fatal blow here? And if they lose this game, like I said, they might be out of the playoff picture.
So I took Georgia Tech in a pretty solid-sized upset once earlier in the year, and that worked, right? I'm going to go for it again.
Ooh.
I think Georgia Tech has the better quarterback in this game. I think Haynes King has the advantage there. I think the Ben Morrison loss is a big one. And I know Notre Dame's always stacked with defensive backs, but look, Singleton and Rutherford, they're hard to cover. Georgia Tech's really explosive, and I just can't help but feel like I know they have the talent. We've seen them do it before, but Notre Dame's front seven, this is not a game where you can be average. They've got to be great like they were last year. So if they step up, they can win this game, but until I see it, I'm taking Georgia Tech. I think, look, their run game, Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, and then what they have to complement it in Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford on the outside, I think it's really one of the more stable things that we have in college football. Like, we know they're pretty good. Syracuse outscored them because that secondary. Kyle McCord was great, right? And Louisville got 2 non-offensive touchdowns in that game. That game was kind of fluky, and Haynes King was really good against Louisville, and that's a struggling secondary. I'm curious to see the impact of the Morrison injury, which team can make more explosive plays in the passing game. I'm going to bet on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, 27-24.
Dawn, I have the exact same score as you, but not the same winner. I'm taking Notre Dame 27-24 over Georgia Tech. I think Riley Leonard is at least capable of making those throws that you talk about. And that Georgia Tech secondary, I have not been impressed by them at all this year. And then I think the Notre Dame run game too, as the Georgia Tech run defense is good. It's really good. Notre Dame's run game is elite, though, I think. And I think that's the advantage for them as well. And then defensively, even without Ben Morrison, they still have some dudes in that secondary with Jordan Clark and Xavier Watts, who, like I said, both of them might be in our midseason All-American team the way that they're playing right now, which comes out sometime this week. I think Friday we're going to put it out. But, yeah, I think Notre Dame, for that reason, is going to win this game 27-24. Don't feel great about it, but I think they'll keep their playoff hopes alive with a close win over the Yellow Jackets. Go over to the next game, Dawn. That is a 4 o'clock game. Colorado at Arizona, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. Two teams that are kind of looking to bounce back in a wide open Big 12 race right now. The Big 12 is easily the most wide open conference in the Power 4. Right now, according to PFF Power Rankings, there are 7 schools with at least a 5% chance of winning the conference title this year. 7 schools with a 5% chance. Of all conferences in America, that's tied with the MAC for the most schools that have that good of a chance. The MAC also was wide open this year. And also those 7 schools, that's tied for, actually no, 2 more than any other Power 4 conference this year. No other Power 4 conference has more than 5 schools with a 5% chance or better to win the league. Arizona, I will say, is not one of those 7 teams right now. Right now they have a 3-3 record, but in our power ranking, Arizona is still a top 45 team. Colorado, though, is still one of those 7 schools, even after their loss to Kansas State on Saturday, and they're looking to bounce back after that close loss to the number 18 at the time, Wildcats. So I'm looking forward to seeing these 2 schools that are trying to looking to bounce back in what's a wide open conference right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Big 12 is a lot of fun to watch, and you have so many teams. I think it's, 3 teams that are 3-0 and 5 more that are 2-1 in conference. So it's going to come down to the end. All these head-to-head matchups are going to be fun. But, no, you're right. I think you said it. You got 2 teams looking to bounce back. Obviously, Colorado with a close loss. They had a chance to win it. Didn't quite get there. Kansas State made one more play than they did, but a fantastic football game. And I think, honestly, even in a loss, I think kind of proved they're for real. And then Arizona, they got to figure things out quick. I mean, they're already 3-3. They're probably already in dire straits. One more loss really puts them out of anything that they wanted to accomplish this year.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, we have done Colorado previews, so many of them, because of, 1, how electric this team is and how many big games they play, and also, 2, because of how awesome their fan base has been for our show. So we want to, first of all, shout out them because they've been amazing. All those previews, it feels like, though, I always have the Colorado offense and you always have the Colorado defense. We're like, no, this time we're switching it up. So you have the Colorado offense in this game. So what are you looking forward to seeing when the Buffaloes have the ball?
It's a good defense. It was a good run. No, I think, honestly, for me, the funny part is I'm not even going too much into Colorado here. It's actually more about Arizona. And you know, we kind of thought coming into the year that their secondary would probably be the best part of their defense, right? Sicario Davis, they got some good players back there. Kind of just hasn't been that. It's kind of the same story as Arizona's offense, too, where it just hasn't been. What's the Denny Green? They are who we thought they were.
Yep.
They are not who we thought they were. Right. And they're 74th in the nation in coverage grade. And that's honestly kind of propped up by a couple of games against Northern Arizona and then the Utah game with Isaac Wilson playing, a true freshman. It just hasn't, just like their offense and how we've talked about in past weeks, where their offense just hasn't clicked. It's kind of the same story with their defense, if I'm being honest with you. And one of the things, I think the schematic thing that I'm going to look for in this game, because if Arizona is just going to be an average defense, maybe they can scheme their way to a win. They run single high defenses more. There's only 7 teams in the country that run more single high defenses. I go, okay, well, then that's what Shedeur has to look for, obviously, whether it's 3 or 1, if they're going man or zone. You know what you're getting. And these two teams played a really close game late last year when Colorado was kind of dead in the water, right? They were already, I believe they were 4-5 or 4-6 going into that game. It was a really tight game. Arizona won with a last-second field goal. So this style of ball that Arizona plays, how it's kind of more of the finesse style as opposed to a K-State or a UCF or all the teams in the conference that run the ball, this plays more into Colorado's hands. And as far as Shedeur, let me get into Shedeur real quick. Let's go against single high defenses since the start of last year, a 90.3 passing grade. I mean, he's got a lot of 90.3 passing grades in his profile, but that's the 6th best in the country since the start of last year. 14 big-time throws against it, 80% adjusted completion rate. Just another thing where if you don't get to him and you don't confuse him and he knows what's coming, especially if it's only one safety, he's going to let it rip. And especially, I believe Coach Prime said today that Travis Hunter should play.
Yep,
I guess we would probably describe him as at least probable, right? If Travis Hunter's playing, did he say anything about Jimmy Horn as well?
I didn't see that, but he said Travis Hunter should be playing on Saturday.
If Travis Hunter's back, because honestly, I think it's really plausible to think that if 3 of their top 5 receivers didn't get hurt against Kansas State, Shedeur probably brings them down even easier on that last drive, and they win the game. Amarion Miller was great, but he got hurt. Travis Hunter. Jimmy Horn's always useful. I mean, they have Arizona's just going to have to kind of be better on both sides of the ball, and for me, that starts in coverage because you're dealing with Shedeur and all these receivers, and if your defense is that predictable, well, he's going to see it. He's going to carve you up unless you win up front.
Absolutely. So my other side of the ball, Dalton. And usually in these matchups, we do team against team, right? Because we want to do that. It's player on player, man. It is the 2 best prospects in the 2025 NFL draft squaring off. So right now, you look at PFF's big board, Travis Hunter is the number 1 prospect in the 2025 draft. Tetero McMillan is number 2. So you have 2 guys who are probably going to be top 5 picks in the NFL draft right now. Number 1 versus number 2. And yes, Travis Hunter, big reason why he's number 1 is because of his 2-way stardom. But he's still been really good this year, right? 84.5 coverage grade, 83.1 overall grade. That's 9th among all corners in the nation. He's one of only 2 corners in the nation with 80-plus grades, both in coverage and run defense. Tetero McMillan, 3rd among FBS receivers this year with 739 receiving yards. 19 broken tackles lead all receivers in college football. For a bigger receiver like Tetero McMillan, that's an insane number for him right now. And these 2 actually played last year as well, and Tetero McMillan got the better of Travis Hunter in last year's matchup. So I went back and watched the tape. Tetero McMillan was on him on 6 targets against him. He caught 4 of them, one of them being a one-handed touchdown over Travis Hunter. And there was a 7th target in there as well that Travis Hunter was called for defensive pass interference on. So you're talking about Tetero McMillan going 4 for 6 with a touchdown, and a DPI was calling Travis Hunter as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing with Travis Hunter. Now you confirmed that Deion Sanders saying he should be playing this week for certain. He said, quote, should play for certain this week. So that sounds like he's probably going to be out there, according to Deion Sanders. But I'm really looking forward to seeing this matchup, not only for the NFL draft, but also it's going to be critical for who wins this game because Tetero McMillan is so pivotal for this Arizona offensive success right now. So it's a great matchup for the draft. It's probably the must-see draft matchup of the entire year. Also, it's big for this game because if Tetero McMillan is held in check, as we've seen before, Arizona's offense kind of sputters a little bit, right? So it's a big match for the game, and it's a massive matchup for the NFL draft.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, to see those 2 guys on the same field, and we'll probably see it on Sundays too at some point. I mean, they're just so talented. And even it's something I didn't mention on the other side too is Travis Hunter, the receiver, maybe against Takario Davis here and there. Also, I mean, you got freaks. You got freaks on the outside in this game for sure. Obviously, Tet. I mean, I keep calling him the next Mike Evans. And to see Travis Hunter go up against him a second time, and it's going to be a fun one. And obviously, Arizona's going to need a big game out of McMillan because, well, they always do.
Yeah. So, Dawn, who are you going with in this game? Will Colorado bounce back from their loss to Kansas State, or will Arizona bounce back after a couple brutal losses for them?
I got to be honest, every Colorado game we've done, I've kind of gone, okay, like there's a road for Colorado to win, and there's a road for the other team to win. It's like pretty clear, like the K-State thing was like, okay, play K-State football and run the ball, and they got that done, and DJ Giddens was great and all that. This is honestly the first Colorado game that we've done that I just sit here and I go, they're the better football team. Just straight up. I mean, Arizona, if you look after the first 2 games against New Mexico and Northern Arizona, you look at the 4 games that they've played in the Big 12 against Power 5 teams, you look at since week 3, okay, that period is Power 5 ranks, okay? They've got the 10th lowest graded defense and the 7th lowest graded offense. They're just not playing good football. They beat Utah because Utah was starting a true freshman quarterback. Otherwise, they're just not playing good football. Colorado, I can at least say, yeah, they got beat up front by K-State. A lot of teams do that. I could at least say, even when they lost that game to Kansas State, pretty good. There was some stretches in that game where they played good football, right? And obviously, you have what I think is the best quarterback in the country. I've got Colorado 35-24. This was a close game last year when Colorado wasn't nearly this good towards the end of the year as they are this year. I just don't think Arizona, it's just not there. I don't think they play particularly good football. I think if you're going to beat Colorado, you got to beat them physically. You got to beat them up front on both sides of the ball. Arizona's not great up front. Other than Tet, they're not really great on the outside. And Fafita, I'm very worried that Noah Fafita, you can clearly see he's pressing. He's holding the ball longer. He's trying to do crazy things. He's turning the ball over way more than he did at any point last year. I just think Colorado's better. I got him 35-24.
Yeah, listen, Travis Hunter wasn't playing in this game. That would be a different conversation for me. But I got Colorado winning this game as well. A lot closer than you. I have 30-27. I think they'll rebound from their loss to Kansas State last week. And with Travis Hunter healthy, that's huge for their offense and defense. I think they'll win this game in a close one. So I got Colorado win this one as well. It's going to be a really, really fun game to see who can bounce back in a wide-open Big 12 race. Let's go over to our final 2 games, Dawn. Both of them coming in the SEC and both of them being night games. Number 8 LSU at Arkansas, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. The storylines know, is this a trap game for LSU? Right now, LSU is in the top 10 for the first time all season, coming off a thrilling 29-26 overtime victory over what was number 9 Ole Miss on Saturday. Even with them riding high right now, they're still only 2.5-point favorites on the road over an unranked Arkansas team. Arkansas is 4-2 on the year. They're coming off a bye week, and their last game they played, they pulled off a massive upset at home, beating number 4 Tennessee in a really, really good game as well. So if LSU's not careful, they could be the next top 10 team to go down in Razorback Stadium. This could, just looking at the betting odds, it looks like it could be a trap game for LSU.
Yeah, the more I thought about this game, the more I am worried about it for LSU. Arkansas is 4-2, and they're very, very. They will probably sit there and tell you they should be 6-0 because you had the Oklahoma State game where they blew the lead and the Texas A&M game where they just made a lot of mistakes, especially late in the game. They're not that far from being 6-0. Arkansas is a pretty good football team. All right, they're physical. Talon Green's playing really well. The run defense is really good with Landon Jackson and those guys. I actually, of all of these games, I think I might be the least sure of my game pick in this one. This is tough. And LSU, that's an exhausting game that they played against Ole Miss too. Went to overtime, high energy, Death Valley at night. That's a good football team. They have to go to Arkansas and play. This is not some pushover thing. And Arkansas, again, I'd bet if you ask anyone in that program, they'd be like, we should be 6-0 right now. We should be in the top 15.
Absolutely.
They lost a couple of really close games.
I don't know. Big reason for that has been their offense and Talon Green having a resurgence right this year. So you have their side of the ball. What should we be looking out for when they have the football this game?
So let's go back to last week with LSU because my problem with them was, look, can you defend the deep ball? Can you secondary give you enough to win the game? And they absolutely did against Ole Miss. Jackson Dart went 3 for 12 on deep balls and he committed 3 turnover-worthy plays. That was the difference. You hold down Ole Miss with that, you got a really good shot because that's what they want. Arkansas is a bit like that as well. And what I want to see for LSU is, okay, you did it once, and you did it against a really good team once. Can this continue? Because for a year and a half, this was not the case. You did it in your biggest game of the season so far against Ole Miss. Can you bring that on the road and do it against Talon Green? Talon Green, who in that Tennessee game, and he got hurt early in the fourth quarter, had 4 big-time throws in that game. Talon Green's got an absolute rifle, okay? Arkansas, they want to run the football with him and Jaquindon Jackson, and they want to throw the ball well downfield because he's got a rifle. In the 4 games, okay, when Talon Green's had at least a 75 passing grade, all right, 4 out of 6 games, 10 for 21 on deep balls, okay? He had 2 other games with passing grade in the 50s. He went 2 for 10. He's going to sling it downfield, and if LSU's up to the task like they were last week, then they'll be fine. Honestly, they will be fine. Their pass rush is getting better. Guys like Braden Swinson playing really good, right? Front seven's getting a little better. They're surviving without Harold Perkins. But one of the interesting things here, LSU early in the year, giving up these deep shots, they're running a lot of man coverage early in the year, more than 48% man coverage. Last week against LSU, A little bit of adjustment, drop that number down around 29, 30%. Now, okay, we're mixing it up and we're not giving up all these deep shots, right? And there's a lot of teams, look, I say it all the time. I did it with Colorado earlier in the year where I'm like, you don't have to run that much man coverage. Yeah. I get it. You got athletes, but sometimes it's hard, man. It's hard to run man coverage every play, even half the plays, like all the time. It makes reads easier for a quarterback, all sorts of stuff like that, creates one-on-one matchups. I just think, and you've got actually here's the thing, though, with Arkansas. They're not as good against man. Their receivers don't separate one-on-one. So I'm actually curious to see the coverage dynamic and how they handle it this week. Does the zone coverage stay, or do they go back to man because Arkansas is uncomfortable with it? Can we become maybe a week-to-week adjustable kind of thing, or is that what we're going to be as a zone team now, and we'll just work with it as we go? The big thing, though, is just holding down Talon Green in the big plays. We've seen it when he's clean in the pocket. He's got a cannon for an arm, and that's really what you're looking at here. I just want to see if LSU – can you do it? Was that a fluke? Was that because there's several teams now that have done it to Ole Miss? Was that a fluke? You see Talon Green there, 91.5 deep passing grade, 11 big-time throws. I think 11 of his 12 big-time throws been on deep balls, of course. He gets it downfield. He's a big-game hunter. And if LSU can prevent those explosives, I do think they will be fine. But let's see it a second week in a row. Let's see it against not a struggling Ole Miss offense, because that's what they are. And let's see it on the road.
Yeah, and listen, that completion percentage might not look great at 39%. On deep throws is really good.
It's pretty good. The closer you get to 50 is really good. 38 to 40 is like it's pretty good. Yeah,
solid,
and in the games like I said, in the games where he's been good, he's completing just about 50%.
Right.
On the deep balls, it's a little bit different scale. You're absolutely right. That's like not a terrible number. Green wants to hit those home runs.
Yes, I know some people looking at it, they're like, 39%, that's not good at all. It's like, no, on deep throws, it's actually pretty solid, right? So, yeah, that's something to watch out for sure. Kind of like a toned-down version of Jalen Moreau in a lot of ways, right? Just take away the big plays, and then you have an advantage in that game. Really, for me, the other side of the ball is, okay, can Arkansas slow down the passing game for LSU? Slow down Garrett Nussmeier and all of them, because LSU's run game has not really been there for them this year, and they've been really reliant on Garrett Nussmeier and their passing game to win ball games. And to their credit, they have been doing that so far. But LSU right now this year throws the ball on 63.5% of their offensive plays this year. That's the fifth highest rate in the Power 4. LSU has performed really well on those, right? They're 19th in the country in EPA per pass. Nussmeier, 12 big-time throws. That's the top 15 mark in the nation. LSU is 25th in receiving grade. They've also been excellent at protecting Garrett Nussmeier. 13th best pressure rate allowed at only 22.6%. You got Will Campbell, who's going to be a top 10 pick. You got Emory Jones Jr., who could be a first-round pick, maybe second-round pick as well. Really good offensive line, really good receivers, Kyron Lacey there as well, and Garrett Nussmeier is letting it rip this year. Other side of the ball, Arkansas is outstanding at defending the run. Right now, 29th in run defense grade this year, but they have some serious issues against the pass. 76th in pass rushing grade this season, 108th in coverage grade. They've allowed a successful play on 36.7% of opposing passing plays this year. That's the 82nd best mark in the nation. So they got to be a lot better in their pass defense, both in pass rushing and in coverage, to take down LSU and pull off the upset, because right now their pass defense is not good enough against one of the most pass-happy teams in the entire country.
Yeah, you got to find a way to get to Nussmeier. I think that's something Ole Miss, I don't think they had a sack last week, or even was it they didn't have a sack or a hit. I remember that.
Yeah.
I had the stat on Sunday, but I forgot it.
No sacks.
It was early in the morning, so some of the things I say on Sunday mornings that get away from me. But yeah, no, they just didn't. They didn't get to him, right? And you really, Nussmeier's a pure pocket passer. You have to get to him. If you don't, I mean, we've seen he's gunslinger, man. He will throw it. Some of those windows he was thrown into Saturday against Ole Miss. I mean, especially late in the game. That's an NFL arm, and if you let him sit back there, it's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, who are you going with? Will this be a trap game for LSU, or will the Tigers, now that they're in the top 10, continue rising in the top 10 with a victory?
I think between this and the Georgia Tech game, these are the two that I'm the least sure of with these picks. This is tough, because I really think Arkansas, we've seen them do it once already against Tennessee. I really think Arkansas has got a good shot to win this game. I'm taking LSU 28-24. I think somewhere along the line, I think Nussmeier, that game last week was so big for them to come back from and get that win. I think Nussmeier I'm just going to say he finds a way. I think there are some spots in this game where LSU is at a disadvantage. And if Talon Green has one of his good days, this is a problem. This is a real problem because Arkansas can kind of lure you into the way they play football, right? They did it to Tennessee. Obviously, LSU's a better throwing team than Tennessee. I think LSU's going to need another big game from Kyron Lacey. I can't necessarily say with this one that I know how they're going to do it because it feels like they're scratching by on defense and they're just getting Nussmeier to win these games. But I'm going to take LSU, and I'll be honest with you, I'm only 55-ish% sure on that because this is a tough one. Arkansas is better than people give them credit for. They should be giving them a lot of credit because they just beat Tennessee, who was, number 4 in the country that night. I mean, and really, again, they are not that far from instead of being 4-2, being 6-0. They got a good team.
Absolutely. So I actually had the same margin as you, LSU 31-27. I'm a little more confident, though, in LSU winning this game because I think in that Tennessee loss, you saw Nico Iamaleava in that passing game really struggle. I have
big difference.
A lot more faith in this passing game than I do in the Tennessee one right now. So I think LSU, even though I have the same margin as you, I feel better about this one right now. And on the other side of the ball, too, the LSU defense is playing really good, right? That Ole Miss game is very, very impressive by that LSU defense. So 31-27, I have it. It was still going to be a close game, but I feel a little bit better about it than you do right now for LSU to go in there and pull off a road victory. Let's go over to our last game, and it is the biggest game of the entire weekend, Dawn. That is number 5 Georgia at number 1 Texas. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time game on ABC. We've been spoiled as college football fans lately. So over the last 4 weeks, there's only been one of them where we didn't have a top 5 matchup. We got Alabama, Georgia a few weeks ago. Obviously, the week after, we didn't get anything, but still had a mad week of college football. Just an absolutely chaotic week. And then last week, we get Oregon, Ohio State. And this week, we got Georgia against Texas. We've been spoiled as college football fans so far. And this is Texas's toughest test of the whole season. The whole season. Not just, so far. No, in the entire regular season, this is their toughest test all year. The Longhorns have looked like the most dominant team in the country through the first 7 weeks, which is why they're the number 1 team in the country right now. They've won their first 6 games by an average of 36.8 points, with their closest game, their quote-unquote closest game this year, Dalton, was a 22-point victory over Mississippi State. Their closest game, they still won by more than 3 touchdowns.
With their backup quarterback.
With their backup quarterback against Mississippi State.
Backup, yeah.
Again, quote, backup quarterback.
A Manning, yeah.
Yeah, a Manning, exactly. But it should be noted, though, Texas has only beat one team that's currently in the top 25, and that's Michigan, who's right now 24th in the country. It's right in the edge of being in the top 25. So Georgia, as a number 5 team in America, is easily the biggest challenge the Longhorns have in the entire regular season. I don't think Texas has a bigger game until at least the SEC title game, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe some people in A&M will debate that one at the end of the year.
The rivalry there,
yeah. The rivalry, yeah. But I just love that we got Quinn in the big cowboy hat back there, too. And that's
elite. That's an elite job by Quinn. That's a
great picture to have back there.
By Eli back there,
That's just awesome. But, no, I'm with you. I mean, so far, I know they haven't played the hardest schedule, but sure has looked like Texas is the best team in the country, hasn't it? But look, Georgia, is it old dynasty against new dynasty, or is it still Georgia running the show here? And Georgia doesn't want to get a second loss either. So this is, look, I know it's Texas's biggest game of the year. This is Georgia's biggest game of the year, too.
Yep.
This could be a second loss already, and I know they'd be 2 top 10 losses, but this is Georgia. We're trying to get back on the horse here after what we saw in the first half of that Bama game. The last 2 games, they've certainly taken care of business, but
Mississippi State game, they were playing around with them a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
It was a little weird. It was like they still won by a good margin, but it was still like they were playing with them a little bit.
You want me to jump into it here to why? I mean, I think the matchup in this game, and look, the big thing about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, right, was, can they play in the SEC in the trenches? That's a resounding for Texas. Look, this is Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams, these guys on the offensive line. They can absolutely play in the SEC trenches, and they're right now the best pass-protecting team in the country after I believe they were second last year behind Oregon, and that Oregon had a legendary pass-pro season. So you're talking about a team first in pass-pro grade, first in pressure percentage. They've given up the 7th fewest sacks in the country. I mean, they've given up 6 sacks on the year, but why that's 7th fewest for them is we've only charged 1 to their offensive line. I believe 4 or 5 of those 6 have been charged to the quarterbacks holding the ball too long. So when you look at what their offensive line is doing, dominant, and we've seen them at times too dominant in the run game. But I'll stay with the pass rush. Look, Georgia's got to find a better pass rush, okay? Last year, kind of the biggest weakness on the team. There's a lot of big-name guys up there, right? But right now, they're tied for 79th in pass rush grade in the country. It's been average, right? We got big guys up front. We got Michael Williams. We've got Nazir Stackhouse. We've got, their leader in pressures with 13 pressures is Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, right? We saw the best moment for them in pass rush was against Kentucky when they were blitzing Jalen Walker every play, right? Mm-hmm. But are they going to be able to send four? Is this defensive line? They're much better in run defense. I will give them that. It's a very good run-defending defensive line, which is going to be big in this game, right? Steve Sarkisian likes that balance and run the ball and RPOs and all that. But they need to find a way to bother Quinn Ewers, because I know Quinn didn't look good last week. If we're being real, I know they won big over Oklahoma, but he physically he just looked off, right? I don't want to be the team that has him standing back there clean and lets him find a rhythm. Absolutely not. We've seen what Quinn Ewers can do when he gets hot, for sure. And even if it's not Quinn, we've seen what Archer Manning can do if anything happens. But it's Quinn's team, right? And if he gets hot, good luck. I mean, we've seen him beat Alabama twice. We've seen him tear up Michigan. We've seen him tear up teams with maybe better defenses than this Georgia team has right now. So obviously Kirby's going to bring his A game. He always does. They're going to scheme up stuff that bothers this Texas team. But at the end of the day, to me, Texas, at least on offense, they have the advantage in the trenches here. Their offensive line should have the advantage over Georgia's D-line that has been closer to decent than great.
Yeah, and Texas has the best O-line in the country right now. It's unreal how good this offensive line has been this year. And you mentioned it, Georgia is 62nd right now in pass rushing grade this year. So it just hasn't been there for that Georgia pass rush right now. Other side of the ball, for me, it's, all right, Carson Beck, can you be Superman like you've been in the last 2.5 games? Because he has been superhuman in these last 2.5 games.
He's trying to get back in that first round conversation.
He really is.
There was some people jumping off the ship, and I was like, wait, don't jump off the ship after one bad half of – you're allowed one bad half of football.
And he had a bad half of football against Alabama. He has been on fire in the last 10 quarters of football for him. So in that second half against Alabama, he had 339 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, and almost won that game for Georgia. He had 2 big-time throws as well in the second half against Alabama, Over the last 2 games against Auburn and Mississippi State, he has a 92 grade, which leads all quarterbacks in the nation over the last 2 weeks. And over those last 2 weeks, 705 passing yards, leads all Power 4 quarterbacks, 6 big-time throws, tied for 3rd in the nation. So over the last 2.5 games, Carson Beck has looked like the best quarterback in college football, like we thought he was entering the year. But he'll have some difficulty, because this Texas defense is a lot better in coverage this year. Right now, they lead the nation with a 93.9 team coverage grade this year. They are also tied for 4th in pass rushing grade and lead the nation in both passing yards per attempt at only 4.6 and explosive pass play rate allowed at 6.1%. So only 6.1% of opposing passing plays have gone for 15-plus yards this year on Texas. It's the lowest rate in the country. And Georgia, without Brock Bowers, without Ladd McConkey, both of whom are doing excellent in their rookie years in the NFL, they don't have dudes in that receiving core anymore. And right now their receiving grade is 49th in the nation. So they don't have a true star in that receiving core. So Carson Beck, who we know is a guy that does really well when it's really good around him, he's having to elevate this offense right now, which is something you don't really want to see him doing too much. And to his credit, he's done it in the last 2.5 games, but can you do it against what's been probably the best pass defense in college football this year?
I'll tell you who does want to see him do that is draft scouts.
Yeah.
Because if he elevates that group through this game against the team that's leading the nation in coverage grade, now you talk about, this is
pass
Carson
rush
Beck.
too. Yeah.
I'm telling you, there is an element there with Beck where – because before the Bama game, it was very conservative, wasn't it? It was just Georgia kind of picking and prodding and letting their defense and secondary win and kind of figuring it out. But then I had a feeling one good thing could come out of the second half of that Bama game, and that was just, you know what? Man, if he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, just let it rip. Let him throw it downfield. Just let him do it and see what happens. You're still – okay, so maybe they don't have a McMillan or a Burden, but these are – athletes at Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the University of Georgia with everything. They got to have something there, right? Look, those 6 big-time throws, I think, in the last 2 games, that's a big thing to mention. I had a feeling coming out of that Bama game, it would be like, you know what, Carson, it's your show.
Yeah.
Let's see it. So, look, is he going to have to be special for Georgia to win this game? Absolutely. If he does it, you're going to get a lot of people back on the Carson Beck train going, oh, okay, maybe that one period of 30 minutes of football, maybe we judged him a little quick there.
Maybe he goes back to being QB1 even. This is a huge game for his draft stock. Honestly, I know a lot of people are dropping him like flies right now, but I think with this kind of game, if he is still Superman like he's been the last 2.5 games, he could do it. But it's worth mentioning, though, second half against Alabama, he found it against a young secondary, and then Auburn, Mississippi State, that's not the best competition either, right? This is the best competition. This is Texas. This is one of the best pass defenses in college football. So really looking forward to seeing if Carson Beck can continue to be this amazing against, again, what has been an elite passing defense from Texas this year. Dalton, ultimately, who wins this top 5 matchup between Texas and Georgia?
I think if Georgia's going to win this game, Carson Beck's going to have to be special, like A-plus first-round level special. I think in a neutral sense, if he doesn't do that and he doesn't have the game of his career, I think Texas is just the better team. I agree right now. I do think they're the best team in the country. I think they're the least flawed team in the country now that it appears, at least, that they have fixed this secondary. That was the biggest problem last year. I'm a little timid about the way Quinn Ewers looked last week, but maybe we'll chalk it up to first game back off an injury and rust and playing a very good Oklahoma defense. So I've got Texas 30-24. I think the home field advantage helps. I think just all the tools they have at their disposal helps, the secondary, the offensive line. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at the advantage Texas's secondary has and their offensive line has, and you pair that with Georgia's lack of really dynamic weapons on the outside and their lack of a pass rush, unless some of those guys up front start playing better and the pass rush are winning one-on-one matchups, I think Texas has a few more advantages. I'll take them 30-24.
I'm also going with Texas in this game, 31-27. I'm with you. The only way I can see Georgia winning this game is, one, if Quinn Ewers is not as effective like he was last week, and two, if Carson Beck is clearly the best player on the field. That's how Georgia wins this game, but those are two really tough things to really predict right now. So I'm going with Texas in a close one. I think Carson Beck, maybe not an A-plus performance, maybe not a career best performance, but I still think it'd be good in this game, good enough to make it a close one. But ultimately, I think the Longhorns show why they're the most complete team in college football right now, and it's a home game for Texas as well, which will play a factor as well. That stadium's gonna be rocking. I got Texas in a close one, 31-27. All right, Dawn. Before we go, we obviously have to do our upset picks of the week. So let's update the standings on where we stand in the upset picks. Eli back in first place with 426 points after hitting his upset this past week. I'm still in second place with 326 points, and you, Dawn, are in last place at 238 points. So just to remind people, the point total is basically you got to pick an upset, an underdog, and the money line, and whatever their money line is, if it hits, will be your point total that you get if it does hit. So let's start off with you, Dawn. Who do you have as your upset pick of the week in Week 8?
So the last 3 upset picks that I've made that I did a whole lot of research on, those bombed on me bad. So I took about 20 seconds to pick this. I just said, you know what, screw it. I have Houston going into Kansas and winning. I liked how Houston looked a couple weeks ago in their game against TCU. Making a little bit of they made a quarterback switch first. They went to Zion Chris at quarterback over Donovan Smith. Looked good. Defense looked a little better. They were running the ball well. I'll take him over Kansas. Jalen Daniels has been struggling. I've got Houston over Kansas at plus 195.
All right, Eli, you are in first place right now, and you've been by far the best out of all of us picking upsets. So what is your upset pick of the week?
I just want to say I got a lot of grief from Max last week for him taking the lead. And just want to say that, surprise, surprise, the king is back. And I'm going to be taking South Carolina over Oklahoma. Really like that defensive line. I think they can get to whoever Oklahoma ends up playing at quarterback, and I just think they can cause enough issues to make it ugly and win an ugly game.
I actually like that a lot.
I thought about that one.
I thought about it.
That was one I thought about, yeah.
That's a good one. I like that a lot. I will be going with Northwestern over Wisconsin this week. I know Wisconsin has a big win over Rutgers, but Northwestern also big win over Maryland.
That looks really
good.
Good.
37-10 win over Maryland. And Northwestern is plus 225 to beat Wisconsin, which is also a home game for Northwestern as well. So with Wisconsin on a backup quarterback and Braden Locke still, remember Tyler Van Dyke's out for the year. I don't know. I like the Wildcats to do that. That's a big spread. That's a plus 225 is juicy. So if I get that, then I'll be back in first place. Hopefully.
That's gutsy. Wisconsin beat a really good Rutgers.
I know they did.
Good Rutgers team last week, and they really dominated that game.
I know they did, but I mean Maryland isn't terrible this year, right? Maryland's 3-3 this year too.
No, Northwest, that was a big win too. Their offense that was as good as I've seen their offense look all season too. Yeah.
Definitely. So, I mean, Maryland, hey, they lost by 14 to Indiana, and Indiana, that's like a really close game for Indiana, the way they've been blowing out teams, too. So, yeah, I'm going Northwestern, plus 225, mainly because that spread is massive for a home team, too, that I think is really, I think Northwestern and Wisconsin, I'm forgetting who I even picked. Northwestern and Wisconsin, I think, are on even playing fields right now. You got the home team that's a big underdog. I'm taking Northwestern in that one. So, I got Northwestern in that one. That is what our Week 8 preview, though, looks like. And just to remind you guys, on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., we will be going live with our Week 8 review show, going over all the biggest results from what should be an amazing weekend of college football. Shout out to producer Ty, producer Eli back there. And again, Sunday morning, 9 a.m., Week 8 review show. Be there or be square. So Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick, and we'll see you guys on Sunday morning for the review show.